I'm super hyped to be here and get to kick off this event. And I want to start with a question I need you to actually answer. Who runs the world?
Girls!
Well, girls, yes. But do we really believe that?
Yes.
Do girls run the world? I think today we could actually argue that AI does. AI runs the world. And I spend a lot of my time thinking about what that means for education in our classrooms. And education, it's a funny topic. Everyone has an opinion about it, and also like an emotional connection. You might have loved a teacher or hated school, or perhaps both. In fact, one of the most watched TED Talks of all times is on the topic of education by Sir Ken Robinson, and it's being commented on even 20 years after it was delivered. And today we're here at one of the most prestigious business schools in Europe, and chances are that during your time here, AI has become an increasingly significant part of not only your life, but also of your education. So let's talk about AI for a moment, although I assume you hear about it all day, every day. But let's see with a show of hands, how many of you use ChatGPT? Awesome. How many use Claude? Okay. A few weeks ago, I was traveling, I was in New York, and my carry-on bag broke, and that's sort of like a minor crisis for me because I practically travel every week. So I used Claude to figure out what would be the right size and model for me to get, and when I went into the store and explained to the sales associate, Claude helped me pick this, he just looked at me with a questioning eye. What is Claude? And mind you, this was in Manhattan. But being surprised that somebody doesn't know what Claude is actually my ignorance. I live in such a bubble. And what feels obvious clearly in this room is not obvious everywhere. If we look at this, each dot is 3.2 million people. 84% of the world has never used AI. However, what I want you to take away from this talk today is that we cannot wait until everyone has used AI, or even the majority, to start implementing changes to our education system. And we need to make sure that students aren't just consuming AI, but actually becoming creators with it. The scale of impact is just too great for that. That being said, the rate of adoption of AI is unprecedented. Within about 2 years of when generative AI sort of became publicly known and available with the launch of ChatGPT, around 40% of US adults have already tried it. By comparison, it took around 12 years for the PC to reach similar levels and around 4 years for the internet. So the AI hype is obviously impacting our lives, but it's even more so impacting kids who are growing up today and their development, which is why we cannot keep our eyes shut to the need to introduce AI in a safe and responsible way. If you work with AI or learn about it or work in tech, you might have heard about the Gartner hype cycle. The idea is that technology arrives, we hit this like inflated expectations, then there is this disillusionment, and then we're getting into this like steady pace of growth. It occurred to me when I learned about the hype cycle in the context of AI that in education, the cycle looks almost like a mirrored image in the beginning. So instead of hype first, we have fear, we hesitate, we block tools. And then once we hit that peak of fear, that's when we start to realize, okay, we can't ignore it. We actually need to run trials and pilots and start to integrate it. For example, when calculators arrived in the classrooms, teachers were convinced that this is going to be the end of math education. Some schools blocked it, some teachers protested, but what happened over time is that we adopted it. We still teach the fundamentals, and we also teach when and how to use the tools. So the question was never really about whether we can allow calculators in the classrooms, but about how we teach for a world where they exist. So when it comes to AI right now, it feels like some schools are finally arriving to that point where they realize we can't ignore this, and that recognition is something important. But asking whether students can use AI is actually completely pointless because students are already using it. In fact, 4 out of 5 students are using AI for schoolwork, according to the Stanford AI Index. So what matters now is whether students learn to use it responsibly, without shortcutting their own thinking, or negatively impacting their development and health. So going back to that curve, I want to be clear. The fear is not irrational. AI is not just a tool that we're using. It essentially shapes how young people think, and we are practically running a global experiment with millions of teenagers without actually knowing the long-term implications. And there are early signals that suggest that the use of AI can impede the natural development, especially when it replaces that productive struggle that we need to have when we're learning new things. And it's not just about the loss of critical thinking or academic integrity. AI affects mental health. Deepfakes are used for bullying, and in the most extreme cases, it has led to tragic outcomes and even death. So education, being careful, it's not a bug, it's really a feature. But here's the problem. Blocking AI does not solve the issue. If anything, blocking teens from doing anything usually tends to have the opposite effect. So to quote a 17-year-old participant from a PhD study at UC Berkeley, "Don't just say it's dangerous. That would make me want to do it more. Tell me why and let me make up my mind." So instead of blocking, we need to decide what safe and responsible access look like. And that's actually a harder job to do, but this is incredibly important. It's important because access can change lives. In 1968, a mother's club at a private school in Seattle used their funds to buy a computer terminal. At the time, this was almost unheard of. There were around 300 million high school-age students in the world at that point, and only 300 had access to something like that, so 1 in a million chance. And one of those students was Bill Gates. And he has said that he can trace back the founding of Microsoft to this moment. I'm not arguing that he wasn't talented, but the point is that he had access that not a lot of people did. Now, if we fast forward to 2020, before COVID, many schools were gradually easing into the digital age. Then almost overnight, everything changed. So before the pandemic, only around 24% of US public schools provided students with devices. And that number went to 45% by spring 2020 and to 96% by the fall of 2021. So what this shows us is that when we have to, we can move and make changes incredibly fast, even within our education system. Right now, a very small number of people have access to AI, and it is catapulting their opportunities and advantages in ways that the rest can't even imagine. And the gap just widens every day when we hesitate to use it. So when AI is blocked out of classrooms, the intention is to protect students. But the outcome is that access becomes uneven and that students use the tool without actually knowing the risks. And this is a choice we should be very conscious of. So the question is not whether we should, and certainly not whether we can adopt. We have already proven that we can. And it's not even a matter of when. We need to do it now. So the question that remains is, how do we do it? And this isn't just about adding one more subject to the high school and middle school curriculum. It's about rethinking the classroom itself. If we get this right, AI can be the greatest equalizer in education. And if we get it wrong, it's going to deepen the divide. So let's use this hype to propel us. So what do we actually do to reimagine education? I have 3 things to tell you. First, make education AI native. Redesign education around relevant skills. And finally, protect and elevate human agency. So in practice, let's make classrooms AI native. I heard a story about an English teacher who just blocked the use of AI in the high school classroom. And then when she received submissions of essays, around 20% of the projects looked very similar to each other. So she emailed all her students, "Get back to me if you used AI in your project." 100% of the students got back to her. So we already know that students are using AI. The point is we need to teach them how to use it. And AI is a tool. Students should understand what it is, what is the technology behind it. When it fails, that will build their agency. But it also needs to be integrated across the entire curriculum. So if we teach English, math, or sciences in a way that we pretend AI doesn't exist, the classroom becomes too far removed from the real world. I also met a teacher who had a different approach, setting clear guidelines around how and when AI can be used. It depends on what skills you're actually trying to learn. So instead of keeping AI out, students have to explain where they use it, how they use it, and what was their thinking. And once you start asking students to explain their thinking, you realize something. We've been measuring the wrong things in education. And so that brings me to the second point. We need to redesign education around relevant skills. So the class that changed me forever was Introduction to Computer Science. I was that straight A's type of student who always did really well under the pressure of tests. But then I got into Intro to CS and suddenly I was so behind. But by the end of the semester, I didn't care about grades because I was so in love with the fact that I was building things that actually mattered in the real world, and I was gaining skills that, well, at least at the time, were very relevant for the job market. And what AI makes possible is that any student in any subject could experience that now without needing years of experience or special talent. The barrier between having an idea and making it real has never been lower. But we're still measuring students by whether they can produce the right answers and preparing them for a world that no longer exists. So we should have real problems instead of standardized stats that AI can just do in seconds. And instead of hiding from AI, we should be measuring how students can collaborate with it. Now on to the third point. We need to protect and elevate human agency. One of my favorite courses in college was Introduction to Neuroscience. On my first class, the professor came in and just held up a real human brain and said, there's nothing special about this organ. I want you to understand. It's just like any other, and we'll learn about it and we'll understand how it works. And in a way, he was completely right. It is just like any other human organ. But in the context of what I'm talking about today, it is actually quite special because that is the organ that produces human intelligence. And that's something that no machine can do. And I believe we don't quite yet know what makes human intelligence so special. Is it morality or curiosity or imagination? Or is it about having an identity? Or is it the ability to decide what are the questions worth asking? AI is, at any given moment, trained in the past. So I think what we want to keep as a future human job is deciding what are these questions worth asking. It's not about what AI can do, but about deciding what is it that we want to keep human and protecting that in our education. So these are the three things that we need to make happen. Making education AI native, redesigning educational and relevant skill sets, and protecting and elevating human agency. We started today with a question about who runs the world. AI is accelerating faster than any technology before it. The hype is real. Students are already using it, and the divide is already widening. So we have to narrow this and get it right now. And the theme of this event, which we just heard, is a step forward. And to me, that step is not just a metaphor. We can take a step with a policy decision, a curriculum decision, and we can decide whether we will make AI something that all students can access, regardless of their gender, race, or socioeconomic background. My grandmother ran a school for 35 years, and she always believed that education is the one thing that can't be taken from you once you had it. And I believe that. And I believe that right now, we are deciding whether AI becomes the thing that really makes this future-proof education accessible to all students, or only for some. Right now, kids are cheating with AI, that's true. But also, there's a 14-year-old in Texas who just used AI to build an app that detects heart disease in 7 seconds because he wanted people who might not have access to other diagnostic methods to be able to have it. So the question is, which future are we going towards? We have agency. If we're ever going to use it, we need to use it right now. So let's use the AI hype to reimagine education. Thank you.